My name is Katie Brown, and this is my resurrection story. I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington. My dad, Lee, was a computer software engineer. My mom, Judy, was a registered nurse, and I have two younger sisters, Krista and Laura. My childhood was fantastic. It was very, very happy. Growing up in Seattle, I spent a lot of my childhood on a sailboat. My parents actually raced sailboats for a while, and I was in my first race when I was 2 weeks old. After having just a very ideal childhood, I found the teenage years to be more difficult, especially junior high. Junior high was really brutal for me. I remember getting picked on a lot, especially with regard to my weight. And I got to the point that I was convinced that nobody would ever like me unless I was skinny. And it really became an obsession for me, and I developed an eating disorder. And those couple years of my life were really miserable. And when my parents finally confronted me and insisted that I get some help for that, I was honestly relieved, because I just didn't want to live that way anymore. And I feel like I wasted a couple of really important years of my life just being consumed with what other people thought about me. And I think if one good thing came out of that experience, it was that I learned very decisively and at a very young age that at some point you just have to be good with yourself, and you can't spend your whole life worrying about what other people think or trying to make other people happy. And that lesson has served me well for the rest of my life. When I graduated from college, I got a job working for a nonprofit organization called Heart to Heart International in Kansas City. They did medical and disaster relief. And my second week in Kansas City, I heard that Tony Campolo was going to be speaking at Kansas City First Church, and that Sunday. And I decided to go, and I found myself sitting in front of a very handsome young seminary student named Darren Brown. And that was the first time that we met. And he eventually asked me to join a small group that he was leading, and I've been listening to him teach ever since. Church was very much a part of my family growing up. My parents served in numerous capacities in the church, from board member to Sunday school superintendent to Sunday school teacher. We participated in just about everything that there was to do at the church. There was never a time that I was not in church, and I don't really remember a time that I didn't know Jesus. I was just raised to know Jesus, and I'm very, very grateful for that. In October of 1998, a Category 5 hurricane devastated the country of Honduras, and I was sent there to oversee the disaster relief efforts for Heart to Heart. And I was not at all prepared for the horrific human suffering that I would witness there. I saw some really terrible things, and they affected me very, very deeply. When I returned to the States from Honduras, I struggled for a really long time. I had nightmares every night for months. I was so overwhelmed with anxiety that there were times that I could not even leave the house. I had been taught from the time that I was a child that God would keep me safe. And I know why we tell children that. It's because we want them to feel secure. But if God had not protected those people in Honduras, how could I trust that He would take care of me? And when I started pulling at that thread, it was like everything started to unravel. And, what else had I been taught that wasn't really true? I had been told that God was a loving God, but how could a loving God allow such horrible things to happen to innocent people? And I just was not sure that I could believe any of it anymore. The thing about a wilderness experience like that is that when you're going through it, it feels like the end of your faith, but for me, it was actually the beginning of my faith. It was the beginning of a faith that was deeper and stronger and more mature. You just have to persevere through it. And you can't do that by yourself. And the whole time that I was going through this and questioning all these things, I never stopped going to church. Thanks to my parents, my life had been so grounded in the church that even when I was questioning everything that the church had taught me, I still couldn't walk away. Another reason that I could not walk away from the church is because Darren Brown wouldn't let me. We had been dating about a month when I went to Honduras, and when I came back, I was a complete wreck. And I really don't know why he stayed with me, but he did. And I don't know that I would be a Christian today if I hadn't had Darren to walk through that with me. He told me so many times, he said, keep asking God the hard questions. Just don't walk away from the conversation. And at a time in my life when I was so completely lost, he just kept pointing me in the right direction. Darren and I married in 2000, and in May of 2001, we moved to Waverly. Now, I had been raised in a northern, urban, upper middle class community in one of the bluest states in the country, and I found myself living in a southern, rural, blue-collar town in the very red state of Tennessee. And I don't know that those two worlds could have been more opposite. And that adjustment was a very difficult one for me. And everybody was so kind and so welcoming, but there was not a day that went by that I didn't feel like a square peg in a round hole. This past Advent, Darren preached a sermon series on holy disruption, how we sometimes get stuck in certain ways of thinking. I think especially when you've spent your whole life around people who are just like you and people who think like you and who see the world the same way that you do. And we tend to perceive Jesus in ways that fit who we already are or what we already believe. And we need to be disrupted. I needed to be disrupted. When the world tells us that when we encounter someone who is different from us, that we should be tolerant. And tolerance is okay, but in my opinion, it's not enough. I don't think that God put me smack in the middle of a whole community of people who were so very different from me to teach me to be more tolerant. I think He did it because He wanted to change me. He wanted to dismantle my worldview so that He could remake me to be more like Him. I think He wanted to show me that I didn't know nearly as much as I thought I did, so that I would be open to learning the new things that He had to teach me. There are still lots of things that I love and appreciate about the culture that I was raised in, and it still it's shaped me in a lot of really important ways. But at the same time, I'm not the same person who I was when I came here, and I'm very, very grateful for that. After Darren and I had been married a few years, we decided that we were ready to have children, and we were so excited because we got pregnant right away. One morning I woke up and I was not feeling well at all, and when I got to the doctor, they couldn't find a heartbeat. That miscarriage was really devastating for me, and really struggled with some depression after that. Tried again, right away to start getting pregnant, and we just didn't for a long, long time. And then when we finally did get pregnant again, we had another miscarriage. Of course, now we have Kendall, and he's healthy and well. And then we had Parker, and we thought we were done. And then we had Macy, and it just seemed like once we got started, we couldn't turn it off. But God has really blessed us and been so good to us. And of course, they are the joy of our life, and we just can't imagine without any one of them. I'm Katie. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me.